Dit zou moeten zijn. Hallo? Hallo? Okay. Okay. Ik wilde je net een bericht sturen dat je telefoon nog hier ligt. Dat heeft
Ja.
niet zo.
Dankjewel.
Okay, I see that the first person that joined me, which probably is the presenter, so hopefully you're seeing this on the screen and you can hear me as well. Hi, Tijl here. Hi, I'm good. You can see me and you can hear me? Oh, okay, great. Yeah, there's a little bit of a delay, like when we're talking on the phone over what you can hear on the screen. It's probably like a 10-6 second delay. Cool. Send me a message whenever you want me to start, okay? When everybody's there. Okay. Thank you so much. So welcome everybody. I'm just waiting for the go ahead when all of you are seated and stuff like that. I can't see you obviously, so I'm just gonna wait for my cue and then I'm gonna start. Cool. So I just got the go-ahead, so I'm assuming you're all settled down. Welcome. So great of you to join my session. It's kind of weird because I'm standing here in the Netherlands talking to a laptop, and I'm assuming there's somebody on the other side listening to me, but of course I can never be too sure. This might be a punked episode where I'm being made fun of, but either way. And it's also tricky with jokes because I don't know if you guys are laughing or it's like bombing like crazy. So I want to apologize for not being there. I was originally planning to come over. I had my tickets booked and everything, but because of some private issues with my family I have to take care of, I wasn't able to come over. So we're going to try it this way. The nice thing is you also get a video because everything we're doing here is recorded, so I'll make sure that's being sent after. The presentation here, you will get it as well with all the screens, and maybe if it's not in like full detail resolution now, I can send it as well. If you want to follow along and if you want to ask questions, there's a link here, tot.fyi, so take on talent set for your information /live. Make it a little bit bigger. I will be checking my phone once in a while because I've got my trusted colleague and helpful person, Pavi, who's local there. So if anything goes wrong or if my voice cuts out or if there's something with the connection, so I'm going to check that for a little bit. But do feel free to log in on your phone so you can also leave comments and ask questions. And I'll see what I can do towards the end to answer them. We should be running for about another 45 minutes. That's what my time schedule is. So after all these kind of like maintenance remarks, what are we going to do and who am I? My name is Tijl Koenderink. I am the founder and executive director of a number of organizations, educational consultancy companies, Novilo and VO op Niveau, who guide primary and secondary schools within the Netherlands to help them deal with gifted education. So help these schools like bring their gifted education to the next level, from a regular classroom to pull-out programs to full-time gifted programs to even twice exceptional programs, and kind of everything in between. I set up Phoenix, and that's being run by a great team right now. Phoenix Talent, which is a gifted dropout center. So kids between 12 and 22 who dropped out of the regular school system go there to recover and find a new meaningful path in life. I set a School of Understanding, a regular school system, but aimed at showing that the education system can be designed completely differently, not just around like the core curriculum and the regular subjects, but to actually be teaching life lessons, well-being, your life attitude, values, culture, and stuff like that. GrowWise is a software company I started to help kids track their development, not by subject, but by portfolio, how they're developing. And Take on Talents is basically what I'm doing now, sharing all the things that I've learned along the way across the globe and in the US in particular. So I've been to a number of conferences. One of my books will be published hopefully in the coming year. So that's also one of the reasons why I'm talking to you, because I went to different conferences and the people that organized this conference were kind enough to invite me. So I'm first going to give an overview, a little bit theoretical, and then I'm going to get more and more practical. And as you can hear, I'm enthusiastic about stuff that I do, so I give a lot of information in a short amount of time. Just relax, be cherry picking. You don't have to understand everything, you don't have to remember everything, but I hope you come away with both a framework where you can understand talent development from a different level and a couple of practical tools that you can implement tomorrow, hopefully in your classroom. So yeah, you're going to get to follow up with the presentation in the video, and I'm going to send a lot of other materials as well, which dive a little bit deeper into the different conversations we're going to do it today. So to prepare, I give quite a number of presentations. I always want to have a little bit of a disclaimer, because I could be completely theoretically sound and talk to you guys about all the scientific proof and the research value behind and the reliability intervals and stuff like that, but that makes for a reasonably boring presentation, I'm afraid. So I tend to err on the side of more popular psychology, of telling fun stories as a way of illustrating it, but do know that all these things are supported by either scientific approaches, evidence-based practices, or stuff like that. So I know the world's more nuanced, and I try to make it an engagement presentation as well. So this is the part of the presentation where I need to talk about giftedness. What is giftedness? But then I run into a problem, because this is the simplest model. Joe Renzulli, wonderful guy, by the way, we had him 2 weeks ago here at an international conference as well. Talks about above average ability, creativity, task commitment, and those combined lead to gifted behavior. And even though he never intended to cognitive skills and stuff like that. Unfortunately, in a lot of schools and in a lot of places, I see models like these being used as a gatekeeper model. Oh, you don't have all the checkboxes of being gifted, so therefore you're not gifted. You're not entitled to a gifted program. But if you're going to use it that way, which is not the way it was intended, but if it's going to be used that way, you run into a problem. And there's like this Dutch cartoon, it's called Fokke and Sukke. And I translated for you guys. So Fokke and Sukke got a report card for the kid. Failing in all subjects, bad attitude, disruptive behavior. You don't think he's gifted now, do you? So maybe recognize this, right? That there are a number of gifted kids who will fit into this description. Bad attitudes, failing subjects, disruptive behavior, and stuff like that. But if you're going to use this model as a gatekeeper, then it doesn't look like an above average ability. And it doesn't look like task commitment either. So the challenge with these models sometimes is if you're going to use them like as a diagnostic tool or a classification tool, then it doesn't reveal the right answers. So a different view. How can you look at these models and the question of giftedness from a different perspective? So a story I want to share with you was a moment when I was going to a meditation retreat. It was 10 days of 10 hours a day of meditation. And it even included a vow of silence. And maybe some people who've met me, that is a challenge for me. But one of the high marks of every day was like 7 p.m. every night, you got a video of the Guru Goenka. The Guru Goenka will be telling stories out of ancient India and the life of Buddha. And one of the stories always stuck with me as like the way I look at life. And the story describes how there's a mother with 3 children and 3 sons, and she wants to go and cook a meal. But then she finds out she doesn't have enough oil to do it. So she sends her oldest son and she says, here's a vase, here's money, please go to the marketplace and please buy me some oil. So the son goes out, he buys oil, he comes back, but he trips and he loses most of his oil. And he comes home to his mother and says, Mom, I lost all of my oil, it's terrible. And his mom is like, well, it's not that bad, but I still don't have enough oil. So son number 2 goes out. He goes to the marketplace, he buys oil, he comes back, he trips as well. And he says to his mom, you will never believe what happened. This is the coolest day ever. I fell, I'm still in one piece, the vase is still in one piece, and I even saved some of the oil. Well, his mom is not as enthusiastic as the kid is, but she still has a problem, not enough oil. So time for son number 3. Son number 3 goes out to the marketplace, he buys oil, he comes back, he trips as well. I think there's like a motor skill problem in the family, but that's just to get from my perspective. Son number 3 comes home and says, Mom, I fell. I'm in one piece, the vase is in one piece. I saved a little bit of oil, but I lost most of the oil. But what I will do now is go back to the marketplace. I will work for this merchant. And if I work for this merchant for 2 hours, then I'll be able to buy new oil. So that's what he did. And this shows like 3 different ways of looking at life. The first person looks at life in a way thinking, whatever happens, it's awful. It's the worst thing ever, and I don't know what to do with it. And so he's like a pessimist. The second is an optimist. Whatever happens, it's awesome, it's great, it's cool. But the most interesting is person number 3. It's not great or awful, but the question is, what are we going to do to make things better? What are we going to do to improve this situation? And that's something I'm a firm believer in. So from a little bit more of a theoretical perspective, there are 2 types of diagnosis. You've got classifying diagnosis. So classifying diagnosis always tries to figure out what are you, to what cluster, to what diagnosis what do you fit into? And if you take the DSM, which is like the official book of like finding out what kind of disorder you have, it's a statistical manual of clustered, disorders. And the theory is that if I know what you are, I know what to do with you. If I know that you're dyslexic, then I can do stuff I do with dyslexia. If I know you score high on the ADD scale, then I know what to do with you. But I'm actually more interested in operational diagnosis. In operational diagnosis, the question is not what are you to figure out then what do we do with people of your kind, but you just directly ask the question, what do you need? What do you need support with? I don't need to know that you have ADD to figure out you need help with your executive skills. And then we can train them, or we can figure out you've got limited ability to train them, so maybe we need medication. But what support do you need? What are the challenges you run into, and how can I support you with that? And the label is optional if functional. Like with giftedness, I'm not sure that it's always useful to know you're gifted or how gifted you are. Sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't, but it depends on the challenges you run into. So it has to do with the goal you're trying to achieve. So we could look at all the different types of gifted acceleration and like all kinds of program, but a lot of those things are about classifying and then tweaking how to fit them into the system. And then the system, this is one of the reasons I set up a different school, is very much designed around the year class method system. We group kids by year, we put them in classrooms of about 30 kids, and we give them a method, a book, that we run through to go from A to Z in that year. And pretty much like 98% of the education system around the world functions around this particular model, which is kind of like an industrial model. You know, it's been designed about 100 years ago. And I think by now we should be looking at different models as well. So what are we trying to achieve? You know, let's go straight for it. We want our kids to be, you know, happy and to be successful. We want them to be able to the future world that's coming, and we want to have them to have a nice, you know, life for that. So what's needed for that? And this is actually one of the places where I got really interested in the world of Elon Musk, and I read his biography, and actually I got to visit the school that he set up for his children as well, Ad Astra at Hawthorne. And one of the things that he talks about a lot is reasoning from first principles. Allegedly, I don't have proof, obviously, but you're not allowed within Tesla or SpaceX to say that something's impossible unless you can quote like a physics law, like a natural law that shows that it is or is not possible. If there's not a natural law against it, if it's not against the laws of physics, then you cannot say it cannot be done. You can just state that it has not been done yet. And that's a completely different conclusion. So this actually got me thinking about the education system. You know, what are the laws of physics of education? And because I'm involved with giftedness like all across the board, like how to optimize what a regular kid can do in his classroom, who's suicidal, bore out, burnout, completely lost his way, getting them back to a place where they're reasonably happy, to like this brilliant kid who's 12 who's trying to do like a university program, like how to max them out. And that got me thinking, like, what are the principles beneath that? And probably you're going to recognize quite a number of things, because what I saw traveling around the world to different conferences is that the same subjects come up. You know, executive functions, mindset, learned optimism, differentiation in content, but also, you know, your developmental level on cognitive, social, emotional levels. So all these different areas keep coming back in different, you know, places, but I lack like a coherent structure around them. And that's what I've been looking for. And I think I kind of found it. And that's what I'm going to share with you guys today. So kind of how did I get here? It come back from a question of how to be successful as a student. And how to be successful as a student, like that's a question that keeps me going quite a bit. It's going to change, and quite profoundly so, to be honest. And I don't think we're ready for that. And I don't think the world and the education system is ready for that. So I often joke that the education system is the right answer, just to the wrong question. It's the right answer to how do we prepare kids for the future if it's the 1950s. It's just not the 1950s anymore. So depending on what the future is, you need a different education system. If you are going towards a known future, you need knowledge. If 100 years ago, you know, my dad was a carpenter, my dad was a farmer, I had to learn to do what my dad did. And if my dad was good at his job and I copied what my dad did, I would be successful because my life would be identical to him. A farmer will run into the same problems that a farmer had, you know, 100 years ago and 1,000 years ago. By now, that's not true anymore, by the way, but that used to be the case for a lot of the world. And like factory work was very predictable. We know what you're going to do. But for the past 30, 40 years, we're going to a different model. We're finding out that we're going into an unknown world. We're going to a world where we don't quite know what we're going to do. If you're going to be a lawyer, for instance, there's no program that says, you know, if you do this, this, and this, you will be successful. Because, you know, every day is different. Every case is different. Every, you know, client is different. But it is a knowable world. So it's unknown but knowable, which means that, you know, I don't know exactly, you know, what's going to happen today, but I know the types of things that are going to happen. And if I know the types of things that are going to happen, I can train the skills to go with them. I can train, you know, debating. I can train analysis. I can train all these different support that. But slowly we're moving to an even less predictable world, an unknowable world. so unknown and unknowable. One of Elon Musk's goal is to travel to Mars and bring, I think in 2050, 1 million people to Mars. Imagine you're put on the workforce and on like the committee who has to design how to live on Mars. Like, how would you design that curriculum? You don't even know what the challenges are, let alone what skills to teach or what knowledge to teach. So if you go into an unknowable world, a world where you have no idea what it's going to be like, that's when you need a life attitude and self-awareness. And how did I get there? Like, one of the questions I kind of ask is like, what are the timeless things we're teaching in education? So the timeless things we're teaching in education, one of the ways to test that is what I call the Mars-Rome rule. So if something that we're teaching kids, if it would have been useful in ancient Rome, and if it still will be useful on Mars, then probably it's pretty universal. So if we look at learning geography, then probably geography was different, like in ancient Rome, and it's going to be useless on Mars. So that's not very timeless. Cooperation as a skill. Yeah, probably if you were good at cooperating, you would have been successful in ancient Rome. And if you're going to be good at cooperating, you probably will be successful on Mars as well. Perseverance. Somebody who perseveres probably would have been popular in ancient Rome, will be popular in Mars as well. So one quote that I really like is by Eric Hoffer, where he said, in times of change, the learners will inherit the earth, while the learned will find themselves beautifully equipped to deal with a world that no longer exists. So that's a challenge. How do we prepare our kids for a world that constantly changes, and where the world that we're preparing for will no longer exist by the time we get there? So this is how I came with the model of talent development. And this mostly focuses on the non-cognitive personality traits. And I'm going to dive deeper into all of these areas. I mean, you probably can't read them right now. But the general overview is that you need meta skills, so skills to translate that talent you have into actual practice. You need a life attitude, like optimism, perseverance, and stuff like that. You need to developmentally develop. For instance, a lot of you probably, if you're in education, you know about Piaget, the different levels of formal operational reasoning, but also Lavenger's, ego development skills, Gebser's worldview development, Kohlberg with his development of moral levels. So those three are actually the core that I think should be part of any curriculum. And then we've got a number of curative parts, or if they're not going well, limiting parts. Your neurophysiology. So if you actually have the brain of somebody who has ADD, you have like a reuptake problem of a certain neurotransmitter, a certain form of dopamine. And that's actually a neurophysiological problem. Your brain works differently. So that will have impact on the types of talent you can express and things that might be more challenging. Pruning periods. So depending on where you are in life, some things are easier to learn than others. There's like the sensitive age, for instance, for hearing. And I've got a baby, 5 months old now, 4 months old. And early in life, our hearing attunes to the frequencies you hear. So, Dutch will have different frequencies from English, and English will have different frequencies from Chinese or Russian. And your ears attune, like your brain attunes to the frequencies that are most used in your language. If you don't get exposed to a language before 6 years old, then it becomes harder to actually hear that language later in life, because your brain has not been attuned to it. So there's periods, like the sensitive learning periods, where you learn faster and more than other periods. For instance, learning to read is one of the examples. You can actually teach a kid that's 2 years old how to read, even if he's not gifted. It just sometimes will take up to like 300 or 400 hours to teach him how to read, which would take like 25 to 40 hours when you do it in their sensitive periods. It might be later, might be earlier. Same goes, for instance, for executive functions. If you teach them too early, very little effect. If you teach them too late in life, if you start training your executive functions for the first time in your life when you're 25, then probably you're going to learn less of it than when you learn it earlier in life. But this gets really technical, and you've got like supplements and allergies. So some kids have like a deficiency in zinc will express in like cognitive challenges, and sometimes allergies. I've got, for instance, gluten intolerance, which makes me like really drowsy and makes it really hard for me to focus. So if you really want to focus on like what part of talent develops into an actual performance, then we first go to neurophysiology. Is your brain capable of doing it? have you been trained in the right pruning period? Is like your nutritional level and your non-allergy level proper? Then is your developmental level properly, developed? Have you been exposed to the right kind of things? Is your life attitude capable of supporting what you're doing? And do you have the meta skills? So this is kind of like the first principle model that pretty much because I get a lot of cases of like really like complicated stuff of a kid not working out or a classroom like being in trouble, and I can pretty much always like bring it back to any of these levels. And two things to add to that, which I'm still struggling with, like, where to put them in the model, is well-being. Higher well-being will automatically translate into a better performance. And so if you feel well, and this is where positive psychology comes in with a lot of areas that really signifies like what areas well-being support and what don't. They've got like 5 areas in the PERMA model. And self-awareness, knowing what your strengths are. Because I'm less and less believing in like neurotypical people, in the sense of that everybody has the same brain. And when we're older, we all take for granted that some people are introverts and some are extroverts or stuff like that. But when we've got kids, often in the school system, we'll teach them how to be like an average student. And they should be more outgoing like the others, or more, self-restrained like the others. So we're all trying to fit them into the mold of average. The better you know who you are and what your strengths are, the happier you will be. It's actually been proven in positive psychology, and the more effectively you can use your talents to make a difference. So to dive into this a little bit more deeply, if you look at the meta skills, what are we talking about? We're talking, for instance, a lot about executive functions. I see that coming by, in a lot of books, in a lot of conferences. So it starts with self-regulation. Between I want to shout something out in the classroom and suppressing it and thinking like maybe it's better to raise my hand, that takes self-regulation. I'm sad because of what happened in the playground, but I need to take a test. Can I suppress those emotions for a little bit, give the place, move on? Next, planning and organization. Probably you all know that kid that has no idea. Like, I record more of my trainings, especially in Dutch. Like the most popular one ever was, my kid has an IQ of 145, but he cannot clean his own room, because so many people recognize it. Like kind of like the nutty professor who is completely scattered. Critical thinking skills. Like, are you aware, for instance, of your own cognitive biases? Availability bias and cost bias and stuff like that. Can you reflect on your own thinking? Learning skills. This is actually where I started out. My big frustration, because I went to 3 different high schools. I got kicked off of 2. Find an answer to how to read a book. People just say, yeah, you just learn it, and then you read it and And I did that, but it didn't work. So I learned all kinds of memory techniques and mind mapping and speed reading and stuff like that. I learned all these skills that made me a much more effective learner. Creative thinking. So you've got like the technical critical thinking, you got the learning thinking, but you also got the creative thinking, coming up with new ideas. But also the different phases of a creative process, because I work with a lot of gifted kids and they love like the divergent process of coming up with new ideas, and they've got like a million ideas that span the entire globe. But then also, learn convergent thinking, like how to bring all those ideas back to one concrete thing that we can use, and what kind of cooperation skills would be useful there. And then social and emotional skills, which, by the way, I purposely take apart because I think they're different things. Learning to socially engage with other people is a separate set of skills from trying to find out a way to deal with your own emotions and express them in that way. Life attitude is a field that's getting more and more like well-known. And it started out with fixed and growth mindset, which I'm pretty sure most of you, if you're like at a conference on giftedness and education, you will have heard of. The idea that a fixed mindset is believing that you cannot change, or your ability to change is limited, and a growth mindset says you can. And having that mindset makes you a more effective learner that enjoys learning more. But that's actually is like one area of life attitude from a huge perspective and a huge field of all kinds of different life attitude parts. So fixed growth mindset is one. Hopefulness is actually a pretty old one from the 80s. Snyder designed that, and hopefulness is not just like this vague thing of, oh, I hope it's going to be all right, but a very concrete theory saying if you know where you want to go, what your goal is, then you have pathways. So how am I going to get there? I want to run a marathon. Do I know how to get there? And agency? Do I have belief and faith in myself to be able to get there? Like combination is really, really important. And you can actually measure it. Hope scale, you got the children's hope scale, where you can actually track that. Learned optimism and learned pessimism from positive psychology. Martin Seligman, together with others, found out that you have learned helplessness, so that you can get into a state of I don't know what to do anymore, and I'm not going to try anymore. And that some people are very susceptible to that and very quickly get learned helpless, and some people are almost immune to it. So what's the factor that makes the biggest difference? Learned optimism versus learned pessimism. A learned pessimist will explain things in a negative way to himself. The explanation style is different versus the learned optimist who will explain stuff to himself in a positive way. But you can train that. You can train a positive explanation style. Locus of control. Do I have an internal locus of control, and do I feel like I'm at cause of my life? Do I have ownership over my life, or do I have an external locus of control? Do I feel like life happens to me and there's nothing I can do about that? Resilience. How do I stack up in the face of adversity? Am I gritty? Do I hold on, or do I quickly give up? And what you will see, and what you'll probably notice, is that there's a big correlation between all of these, right? Like, a fixed mindset will support resilience. Learned optimism will support resilience. If you've been resilient for a long period of time, then probably your locus of control will be more inward. So there's a lot of areas that are combined. And curiosity is like a huge one. Do you enjoy finding out new things? And kids are actually naturally born with that. Unfortunately, we unlearn them and unteach them the ability to be curious by putting them in a set curriculum and tell them that they should be focusing on the work at hand, not all the other things that are going on. And the challenge is how to combine the two, because it's good and from like the executive function of self-regulation to focus when needed, but it's also good to be able to see the bigger picture and the bigger world and be curious about it. And then we get to developmental psychology. And I actually got into this because I was called in with several groups of students that were not doing really well. They were misbehaving and a lot of things that were undesirable. And we worked on executive functions, we worked on thinking skills, we worked on fixing growth mindset, and we worked on all these things, and they were actually pretty well. They believed in themselves, they were persevering, they just were not persevering in the right direction from our perspective as adults. And so what I ran into was Kohlberg's levels of moral reasoning. Like, what moral level are you on? And like at the lower moral levels, the moral view of the world is if you're not caught, you were not wrong. So if you don't get caught doing something, then that thing you were doing is not actually wrong. But that's a pretty scary combination with a kid with an IQ of under 40, because they're actually really good in not getting caught. But the fact that they're not getting caught doesn't mean that they were doing something right. And I think I loved Dr. Joe Renzulli's presentation, where he talked about Nelson Mandela and Idi Amin, who was like this awful dictator. Basically, if you look at them from a skill level and from a life attitude level, they're pretty similar. They're extremely gritty. They're optimistic. They keep going. They are hopeful. They've got self-regulation. They've got social skills. It's just like, where are they using it? And this is where like developmental psychology came in, and trying to figure out what's the developmental level that somebody's at, and how to guide them at the developmental level they're at and support them, or maybe one level higher. But if you go too far beyond the level that somebody is, it will not resonate anymore. So is this entire perspective a new idea? Not really. If you look at most models, both Gagné's model and Heller's model, so Gagné talks about, as most gifted models these days, by the way, about your talents, from creative talents to intellectual talents to social talents and stuff like that. There's like a developmental process that leads to that talent exposed to like some kind of performance. And that development process is supported by intrapersonal stuff. So the co-cognitive skills, or the things that I was talking about, like the skills and the life attitudes, and environmental factors. So you as a teacher, you as a parent, or stuff like that. And what I've been trying to do, and actually Heller's model has the same, the talent factor predictors, the performance areas. And on one hand, you've got the environment, and the other hand, you've got the non-cognitive personality characteristics that they moderators. What I'm trying to do is make them concrete, as opposed to like we're hoping that he has an internal locus of control. I'm trying to see what kind of interventions can you use in the classroom as a teacher to support a kid with that. And then we can make it like into a real concrete program as well. So how to make it concrete and how to operationalize it into individual theories. Like that's really important. And what I would like to do is give you guys some examples, but this is the moment where I usually will ask people to raise their hand and just give me like one or two of the theories or of the subjects that I was talking about, so I can use those as an example. At the same time, I have no idea if any of you can actually share messages. So I'm seeing that there might have been some issue with the slides, that they looked a bit fuzzy, so I will send you the presentation so you get all the information, especially like small letters and stuff like that, so you will get that. So I'm curious if anybody can share any questions or any subjects that that you would like me to dive into. You want to know more about the executive functions or more about the moral developmental levels, or like what part of these theories like strikes you the most and would you like me to talk about most? So see if you can go, tot.fyi/live, because that's a place where you can log in and you can leave some messages if you want. Or maybe somebody who was online. I see Jessica was online, who can leave messages, who can share some things. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick one out and I'm going to explain it, and then in the meantime you guys can figure out if you can leave messages, because I think there's like a 15 to 30 second delay in this anyway. What I want to talk to you guys about is the learned optimism and learned pessimism. So learned optimism and learned pessimism, I already went into it a little bit, was Martin Seligman figuring out, we've got this thing called learned helplessness. Somebody who's giving up trying to improve because they kind of feel like I won't be successful anyway. And when he did the research in the 60s and 70s, he found out that like a small percentage of both animals and human beings that you put into a state of learned helplessness is actually immune to it. They're almost impossible to get into a state of learned helplessness. So given that fact, like for a little while he was okay with that, but after a while he figured like that is actually kind of like annoying from a theoretical standpoint. I need to look into that more. And then he found out what the difference was between the learned optimist and learned pessimist. So the person who was resilient and immune to learned helplessness and part of depression actually, and the one who isn't. And it's explanation style. And this goes along three axes: pervasive, permanent, and personal. So let me give you an example of a learned pessimist, how he deals with the world. A learned pessimist, say I'm going to have, I'm going to play ball with a learned pessimist. We're going to play basketball. We're going to play a game, and the learned pessimist loses. When a negative thing happens to a learned pessimist, what he or she will do is make that negative event permanent. I always lose these games. He will make it too pervasive. So it's not just basketball games I lose, I always lose all games. And why do I always lose all games? Personal, because there's something wrong with me. But then, a completely different week, suddenly we have, for instance, a game where the learned pessimist will win. Then the explanation style will be reversed. What will happen is that the learned pessimist will say, oh, I won this game. It's not permanent, but it's temporary. So I won this particular game. And it's not pervasive, I don't win all games, but I won this particular game against you. And it's not personal, but it's apersonal. It's probably because you had a bad day. So when you do this, when things go wrong, you make them permanent, pervasive, and personal. And when they go right, you make them temporary, specific, and outside of yourself. Then it's very hard to build up a positive self-esteem. Because anything that could help you build up a positive self-esteem, you're going to make smaller. And everything that's going to put a dent in your self-esteem, you're going to make bigger. The learned optimist does exactly the opposite. When the learned optimist wins, he will make it permanent. I always win. He makes it pervasive at everything. And why? Because I'm cool. And hopefully from like a fixed growth mindset perspective, because I try so hard. Because I practice so much and because I'm using right strategies. When things go wrong and you lose a game, it's like, well, I lost this particular game at this time, this specific game, and it's apersonal. Might be, you had a good day, maybe I had a bad day, but it's not something that's completely my fault. Of course, there are nuances, and being 100% learned optimist is not a very healthy thing, but leaning more towards learned optimism actually makes you function better in the world. A book I can really recommend is The Optimistic Child by Martin Seligman. This book actually dives into the subject quite a bit more elaborately. And to make this more concrete, like, what can you do with this? So step one with pretty much every intervention in every of the areas that I've talked about is psychoeducation. And it's not like psychoeducation, but psychoeducation. So you teach them about psychology. Teach them the theory. Show them this video. Have them watch this video together with you. I've had teachers do this in the classroom. Look at like a portion of the video. For instance, I also have like a TEDx talk where I talk about similar subjects, and then have a group discussion about like, what does this theory mean and how does it work, and do I like cognitively understand it? But cognitively understand it is not enough. Like, then I understand it, but then I don't know it. Don't know it in a way of doing it in life. So the next step then would be to practice it. So what I will often do is first practice it like from a theoretical perspective. Let's take a thing like winning or losing a basketball game, or it raining on your birthday parade, or it, being in line for a long time at Disney. Take any event and then have the assignment, explain this to me like a learned optimist, explain this to me like a learned pessimist. So now they have to rack their brain trying to find the answer of both sides of the equation. So, standing in line at Disney, make it permanent, make it temporary, make it pervasive, make it specific, make it personal, make it apersonal. By doing this, they're slowly stretching their brain to the idea of, I could do this in a different way. That is actually pretty awesome. So next time, you can not just apply it in a theoretical fashion, but you can apply it to a concrete situation. A kid coming in saying, like, oh, it was raining again, it is always raining. Then you can say, hey, remember the exercise we did last week? Looking at it from the learned optimistic and the learned pessimistic side, your writing assignment for today is write an essay and write both sides. Write the learned optimistic side and write the learned pessimistic side. And the interesting discussion you can have afterwards, which is actually a great philosophical conversation to have with a classroom, is which is true. So when we've written out both of these scenarios, which one is more true than the other? And if you have like a number of discussions about this, almost all kids will agree to the conclusion that there is not one that's actually better than the other. It's actually arbitrary which one you choose. But if they're arbitrary, and one makes you happy and function better, and actually, I think you even make more money when you use it, and the other one has like a bigger chance of depression, you will do less, you will learn less. Which one should I pick? Like, from a utilitarian standpoint, it makes more sense to lean towards learned optimism. So the next step that would be interesting from that perspective is to, for instance, do role playing, or do the questionnaire. So it's actually a scale, the optimist pessimistic scale, and figure out where you are, and then have the pessimistic kids ask the optimistic kids how to explain something, and vice versa. So now we're operationalizing a theory. Now we're making it concrete and trying to figure out how to use this in real life. So let's pick out another one, because I'm not seeing a lot of questions coming through yet. That might be technology. It might be that it's kind of like hard to send in. So I'm going to pick another one. So I'm really into developmental psychology. I think that's actually a really, really interesting subject. And I'm going to talk about it from, I'm seeing actually a message that some people want to talk about executive functioning skills. So I'm going to backtrack a little bit. I'm going to focus on that. So two things I'm going to do. One is name dropping, give you a bunch of books. The best introduction book on this is Smart But Scattered that I've seen. Peck Dawson and Richard Ware have written a book, Smart But Scattered, and their kind of like sequel, or the more technical, elaborate version, I think, executive functions in youth and adolescence. So if you just look up Richard Ware and Peck Dawson, you will find them. So the most important thing, like why do gifted kids have challenges with executive functions? Why do you have, for instance, trouble self-regulating? I actually had a discussion with a number of kids, which of course, psychoeducation, first explain it to them. Even watch movies about the prefrontal cortex and how it works and stuff like that. So have a discussion about it. And then we were talking about like how come, like mine are pretty weak as well. I've got like ADD and like twice exceptional and everything. But you see that with more gifted kids. So how come? So in general, with skills, they're kind of like muscles. So you have the principle of use it or lose it. The more you use them, the stronger your skills will be. The less you use them, the weaker your skills will be. So I often use a metaphor of the cheetah. You probably know that. Stephanie Tolan wrote like a wonderful little story about what about, if you have a cheetah and he's stuck in a zoo, like will he ever be able to run like a cheetah can? Probably not, because he's not training. He's not using his muscles. And so if you keep, feeding a cheetah, hunks of meat that you put in front of him, or even like feed him. I was talking with these kids, like, why do you have such a hard time focusing on a teacher? And these were kids who were in like their pull-out program for the first year, or actually a self-contained program, I think. And they said, like, we really struggled in the beginning with the self-contained program because I couldn't focus for more than 2 minutes. And why couldn't you focus? Because I never had to. In my previous classroom, whenever my teacher would explain something, she would explain it another 3 times, and after 3 times explaining it, she would hand me the book that had it written down anyway. So I would sit in the back of the class and I would be reading my own book because I'd be more interested in that than hearing the same story 3 times. So I actually never listened to the stories as they came by. And because I didn't practice it, I wasn't able to do it. The same with, organizing your materials. Some kids, especially, the kids who struggle more with catching up, they will be really organized often to compensate for that weakness. But what if, you at the end of 20 minutes of working on your homework, you spend 18 minutes goofing off and you look at it and you fill it out like in 2 minutes and you're done, then it's awesome that you got that done, but you didn't get any practice in, prolonged, sustained, focused work because you didn't have to focus. The work is too easy. As a cheetah, they had you catch a rabbit, and that was so easy like that. There's just no point to doing that. So the biggest lesson for me in this is like 2 steps. Step 1 is make sure that the environment is designed in such a way that you need executive functions. And what I will often do is put it into games to practice it. So 1, make it necessary, is make feels complicated enough. So for instance, have a classroom lesson one day and say, I'm going to explain this to you 1 time, and I'm going to go pretty quickly, and maybe I'll just do it with the gifted kids or with a flex group or whatever you're doing. And next week I'm going to give you a test, but the only way you're going to get this material is me talking about it for 10 minutes. So now they need to use that 10 minutes to actually get the information, write it down, process it, and next week to give it back to you on a test or whatever. So now I'm creating an environment that needs that focus. It could also be as simple as going to Walmart and buying a Sudoku book. Sudoku, like 3 or 4 or 5 stars, whatever complexity level is needed for them to have to focus for 30 minutes to fix it. And then see, can you focus on that? Ideally, you want to do it with like content differentiation, making sure that the content is actually complicated enough to force you to learn these materials. And then practice it. Practice it with games. You can practice organization skills. Like we had one of our teachers. Awesome. The boys could make a mess of the classroom and the girls had to clean it up. And then there was like a stopwatch, like how much time does it take you to clean up a complete classroom in disarray? Some teachers are like really scared about this, but it's actually a really fun game. And then the other way around. And it actually turned out that with like cooperation and working together, in about, I think, 1 minute and 45 seconds, they could have a complete classroom in disarray and have everything in the right spot. So now they're practicing both cooperation and organizational skills. So prolonged focus, one of the great games to play is look at each other in the eyes, don't laugh. So now you're teaching self-regulation of keeping your emotion down and keeping your focus on the other. And one of the games that actually turned out to be really popular is who can look at a stopwatch for the longest period of time. It's crazy. I would have never suggested it because I think it's like almost barbaric, but they love playing the game. Just sitting there, both staring at a stopwatch, seeing who can do that for the longest period of time. And also, training your memory. Working memory is one of the executive functions or executive skills. You guys probably know the game. I'm going to go on travel, and I'm going to take a lot. And then you can put one thing in. I'm going to take my toothbrush, and I'm going to take my suitcase, and everybody adds one thing, and we're going to see, how long are you going to keep that up. And by training that more and more often, it becomes easier and easier to do. And then, some kids really like a challenge. So what I'll often do is, I trained in memorizing numbers, and you can actually look it up on YouTube, how to memorize 100 digits of pi. And there's technical approaches to this, learning how to do it. It actually makes a really fun classroom project together with the kids to learn about all these different skills. So I went through a lot of things, and I'm closing up on my closing time, I'm pretty sure. So you guys have to wrap up. I'm really sorry I'm not there with you, because it'd be a lot more fun if I'd be there with you and we'd have lunch together and dinner together and stuff like that. So I'm really sorry I'm not there. I hope through this live stream that you could get a decent quality and you got the story. I'll make sure that the presentation, everything is, that the committee has everything, so you get everything in follow-up. And I'll send you, I think, about 5 or 6 other videos that elaborate on all the different parts, so that elaborate on the future vision, on the different levels of the cognitive functioning, so the different developmental levels, executive functions, some different presentations, so you can dive more deeply into different materials. And undoubtedly, next time, I'm definitely going to be going to be joining your conference and to see you. So thank you so much for spending time here. It's kind of weird to look at a screen with a guy who's talking in the video. So I'm assuming you've been good boys and girls and you've trained your executive functions. Thank you so much. Pavi, I would love a picture of my crowd, because I don't know if I'm talking to one person or 5 or 20. And please just go do something with it. If you have any questions, my email is over here, info@takeontalents.com. I'll be happy to answer and make sure to reference you to anything you can find. So have a great day. Move on to your next part of the program, and we'll be in touch. Thank you so much.